His father always told him to dedicate his life to upholding the honor of the family name. Cian stands with several armored figures in white cloaks across a desolate and rocky landscape, all of them holding their swords at the ready. Cian hunches over amidst the debris, collapsing in pain and gasping for breath. White light fills the space. Cian takes deliberate steps across the cracked ground. Cian grimaces through severe facial injuries. Jurkin leads a formation of formidable warriors with a grimace, a lone knight known for holding his own against the fiercest opponents on the continent. A knight's severed arm lies on the cracked, blood-splattered stone, his helmet and sword discarded next to it. Cian Vert stands elegantly dressed and surrounded by his armed subordinates, smiling down at the hooded Cian. He taunts his opponent, exclaiming that Cian is indeed his younger brother. Cian's bloodied face is resolute as he hears a voice call his name from a glowing object near his shoulder. Cian Vert grins widely, revealing prominent fangs as one of his eyes glows with a vibrant green light. Cian grips the glowing, ornate purple artifact, his gloved hand wreathed in dark and pink swirling energy, and demands to know who gave the order. Cian wields a sword enveloped in powerful red energy, his mouth bloodied and his eyes obscured. Jurkin clutches his fist and grits his teeth in pain, realizing the rumors about the vile black mist are true. Cian unleashes a red and black energy aura, standing in a confrontational stance as he declares his opponent is an assassin belonging to the mist. Jurkin manifests powerful red energy from his hand, a determined smirk on his face. Cian has blood on his face and his eyes glow red as he clenches his fists, a powerful crimson aura erupting around him while he warns his opponent, they will not have a single tooth left. Cian Vert smirks as he activates a powerful red magic barrier. Swirling energy erupts around him and he declares that his level 9-star magic will prevent any escape. Cian watches a figure become engulfed in swirling red energy, deciding he must escape to warn his brother and discover who is behind the attack. Cian's eyes glow red as he screams in rage, unleashing a wave of dark, destructive energy from his hand and vowing to raze everything. Cian Vert steps forward in his armor, ordering Cian to stop. Cian stands in the background with a smirk on his face. Cian, injured and bleeding, grips his glowing weapon and unleashes a powerful red energy, yelling the command to freeze. He recalls his father's words, a command to dedicate his life to upholding the family name because his brother Ashel is the family's honor. A glowing blue message declares that Cian Vert's success is your success. Ashel stands in his elaborate golden armor, looking forward with a stoic expression. Cian glares intensely to the side, blood streaking from a cut above his eye as he thinks about the one behind this situation. Ashel stands looking down in shock as a heavily armored warrior strides past him, and he suddenly questions if that man was his brother Ashel. Jurkin steps onto the broken ground, gripping a small, glowing device in his hand. Ashel turns his head away, his expression stern as he states that their eyes reveal they do not understand why he is there. Cian stands on the ruined ground, enveloped in glowing red energy as the heavily armored Cian Vert descends from above with his sword drawn. Cian is engulfed in dark red energy, his eyes wide with shock as he confronts his brother and demands to know what this means. Ashel looks down with a serious expression and tells Cian she has performed her duties well for their family name and for the people. Cian stares intensely forward with blood on his face as a dark, pulsating red aura emanates from him. Ashel stands in ornate armor over a hunched figure engulfed in red energy, telling them he is there to lift the weight of their duty from their shoulders. Cian's hand clenches an ornate dagger engulfed in swirling dark red-pink energy as he questions if he did something wrong. Cian glares forward, his eyes narrowing and his brow furrowing. Cian stands cloaked, engulfed by a sinister red and black fog as he holds a glowing pink dagger. Ashel screams while emanating light, accusing his opponent of deceiving everyone and demanding to know if they are truly unaware of their heinous sins. Cian looks downward, his face pained and streaked with blood, as he questions whether he is a murderer guilty of heinous sins. Cian glares intensely, his eyes glowing red as he grits his teeth in rage. A feud over the imperial crown begins as countless hands reach upwards to claim it. Cian, his eyes glowing red, unleashes a wave of blue energy toward a horned female and the advancing demon army, beginning their suppression and the war for the unification of the continent. A magical crest forms in the air, featuring a circular emblem, 2 crossed glowing swords, and a diamond symbol with a red eye, all surrounded by runic script. Cian Vert stands with his back turned, his armored form surrounded by a bright light as he declares that he helped them succeed in everything they started. Jurkin slams his red energized fist into the ground, shattering the earth on impact. Cian stands with his back turned, engulfed in swirling red and black energy that rumbles around him as he speaks. Jurkin is engulfed in a volatile aura of red and black energy, his eyes glowing red as he clenches his teeth in a grimace of rage. Cian's armored leg glows with red energy as he stands in a pool of blood dripping from above, declaring he does not care if he destroys his own body. Cian's eye glows an intense red as black and red energy swirls around his face, and he declares his intent to put everything into this moment. Jurkin roars as a column of red and black destructive energy erupts from the ground around him, while Cian and Aaron watch from a distance. Jurkin unleashes a red magical aura, forcing the surrounding armored figures to recoil in shock. They stare in disbelief, unable to comprehend how he still possesses such an inhuman amount of magic. Cian lunges forward, cloaked and wreathed in red energy while wielding a glowing red blade, and he screams that the supposed great hero is so scared of his own brother that he feels the need to kill him, questioning if he has any shame. Cian's eyes narrow with intense focus, his expression hardening with determination. Cian rushes forward at high speed, enveloped in swirling dark red energy. Cian deflects a barrage of red energy attacks, bright sparks flying from the impacts as he skids backward. Cian, enveloped in red energy, delivers a single devastating strike to his armored opponent, believing one hit is all he needs. Cian's face is obscured by swirling red energy, his eyes glowing as he wields a sword emanating pink energy. He realizes he must hit a vital point that won't be able to heal. Cian collides with another figure in midair, their impact generating a bright explosion of energy that sends shockwaves radiating outwards. Cian charges forward at immense speed, a shadowy figure surrounded by red energy and sparks as his eyes glow. Ashel watches a figure cast a powerful spell, creating a field of glowing runes and golden energy, and he shouts, "Damn it, Boris." The hooded Cian unleashes a devastating energy attack, his red eyes glowing as the force explodes on impact. The ornate dagger, glowing with a red, fiery aura, is knocked through the air and clatters against the ground. Cian Vert, clad in golden armor, drives his sword through Cian's chest as a dark, fiery aura emanates from Cian's head. He tells his brother he hoped for a peaceful send-off but was forced to act when Cian revealed his true colors. Cian coughs, blood spilling from his mouth from the fatal wound. Ashel stares forward with a resolute expression, declaring that he recognized his opponent's true nature a long time ago. Cian stands in profile, severely injured with blood streaming from his eye and mouth. He struggles as a red energy emanates from around his head and shoulders. Cian Vert strikes Cian with a heavy weapon, knocking him backwards and sending him falling. Lord Ashel, in ornate white and gold armor, stands with his back turned and gives the order to depart. One subordinate lies on the ground while another acknowledges the command. Cian lies on the cracked rubble, bleeding from severe injuries and muttering in frustration. Cian's face is covered in scratches, and blood drips from his mouth as he closes his eyes, thinking his life has been foolish, and this is his end. Cian's eyelid droops in a condescending stare as he thinks to himself how pathetic his opponent is. Ashel turns his back and shouts the command to scramble, exploding forward with a burst of power. Jurkin, a cloaked figure with glowing red eyes, launches an attack from the air on the blonde warrior, screaming "Di" as the warrior's face is shown bloodied and screaming. Cian blocks the overhead attack as the red blade smashes into his golden armor, the force of the impact stopping the weapon cold. Cian erupts with a blast of golden energy, violently pushing back multiple figures. A voice cries out urgently for the young lord, shouting Lord Cian's name. Cian clutches his chest and gasps for air, sweating profusely as he appears to be in extreme distress. Emily, dressed in her maid uniform, yells in frustration at someone off-panel, demanding they get up and get ready. Jurkin rushes forward and appears suddenly before Emily, startling her. He confronts the maid, demanding to know what she is doing there. Cian's eye widens in pure shock as a bead of sweat rolls down his cheek. Emily stands shocked with her mouth agape, internally questioning Lord Cian's words as she thinks it has been nearly 20 years since she has seen the woman. Emily looks into her room and identifies it as her childhood bedroom, seeing the furniture is arranged exactly as she remembers it. Cian sits up in bed, his eyes wide with shock. He clutches his face in disbelief, realizing he is a young boy again. Cian jolts upright in bed with wide eyes as a maid calls his name from off-screen. Emily looks intensely frustrated as she yells, telling someone to gather their courage and go to the sparring match. Cian stares forward with wide, surprised eyes, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. Cian sits up in bed inside a sunlit bedroom as a maid stands beside him, and he asks with a confused expression what sparring match she is talking about. The multi-storied castle of the House of Duke Vert stands under a clear sky. Cian stands with his back turned and looks up at the large castle, realizing he has returned to the castle of the past. Cian's eyes are wide with terror, sweat covering his face as he gulps in absolute shock. Cian remembers a specific day from 27 years ago, March 1, 985 SC, standing as a young man in a grand palace courtyard before a crowd and two figures on ornate thrones. The memory occurs 1 year before Cian entered the academy. Vert and Jurkin sit upon thrones in a grand hall, presiding over a formal gathering of nobles for the territory's monthly sparring match. Vert sits in his ornate chair with a stern expression, his hand resting on his chin as he observes the event in deep thought. Vert stands with his arms crossed and a smug expression on his face, a sword resting at his hip while a maid stands beside him. Vert sits on a stately chair in a period gown, a subtle and knowing smile on her face. Cian stands alone in a large hall, tears streaming down his face as he clutches a fencing foil in his tattered clothes. He was an illegitimate child whose humiliation this day made him a laughingstock to everyone. Cian recalls his father's imposing back, the man in the red cape turning away as he told Cian to stay out of the way, marking the moment he lost all interest in his son. Cian confidently holds a fencing foil while his maid, Emily, looks exasperated and tells him to just forfeit. He dismisses her, stating that he will simply win, then internally sighs that even his own maid thinks he is hopeless. Cian's eye is wide with exertion as a drop of sweat runs down his temple. Cian struggles to hold the rapier, distressed by its weight as he realizes he is back in his feeble 10-year-old body. In the background, Emily pleads with him, her face full of worry as she begs him not to get hurt. Cian firmly grips the hilt of his rapier. Cian stares, his purple eyes wide and intense, a bead of sweat on his face as he wonders if he has really gone back to his past. Cian and Ashel stand face to face in a grand hall before the seated royalty. Ashel looks at Cian with a smug expression and calls him courageous for appearing, stating he was sure Cian would not show up. Cian considers the implications of his power, questioning if he should also be able to change the past. Cian looks nervously to the side, sweat beading on his temple as a large text prompt with the word turn appears before him. Vert stands in a formal military uniform with a stern expression, raising his right hand to signal the start. Vert lunges forward with his sword, shouting at Cian, who stands calmly prepared for the attack. Vert draws his sword with a smug and aggressive laugh. Cian looks intently to his right, judging his target's movement to be as slow as a snail. A figure's feet move swiftly across the tiled floor. Cian staggers backward, his mouth agape in complete shock. Vert slams his sword into the ground as Cian observes from a distance. Vert lunges forward with an enraged expression, shouting at his opponent for being a dodging coward. Vert swings his magical sword down with great force, but Cian raises his own blade to deflect the powerful strike. The blonde assailant lands a kick on Cian's leg, causing a bright flash of light to erupt from the point of impact. Cian's face contorts in pain, sweat beading on his skin as he grimaces with intense effort. Cian screams and collapses to the ground, clutching his arm in pain as a dark-haired figure observes him from behind. Vert shouts the name Kranz in alarm as the bearded man beside her stares in surprise. Cian stands over his cowering opponent with glowing red eyes, pointing his sword down at the enemy's throat to end the match. Cian's hand clenches tightly around the hilt of his sword. A blonde boy repeatedly kicks a kneeling victim in a flashback. Cian smirks at the memory, recalling how Kranz used to make his life miserable for entertainment and continued the harassment at the academy. Cian glares forward with glowing red eyes, resolving to beat his opponent so decisively that he will never dare to act up again. Cian stands over the defeated Vert, his sword glowing as the other man lies on the ground. Vert sweats, his eyes wide with panic, as a violent blow strikes him across the face mid-declaration. Kranz lies defeated on the ground, frothing at the mouth after losing the sparring match. Cian stands in a grand hall with a bowing maid and his father, the Duke, and he thinks about how the Duke postponed a journey just to meet him, concluding he must have made a great impression in the match. Jurkin, the Duke's personal high knight and bodyguard, escorts Cian through the grand hall toward the office. Cian stands in a grand arched hall, observing two faceless women in period dresses. Cian smirks, thinking the woman looks royally pissed after visiting her son in the infirmary. Vert's face twists with rage as she screams at the Duchess, accusing her of being brazen after what she did to her own brother. The screen is white. Jurkin walks past Cian and two women with a dismissive smirk, stating it was only a sparring match before excusing himself to leave. Cian glares forward with a determined expression, his eyes glowing as he issues the command, freeze. Vert glares to the side, her face twisted into a snarl as her green eyes glow with fury. Cian's face contorts with rage, his eyes glowing red as a dark aura envelops him while he thinks to himself that she has crossed the line and questions if he should kill her. Cian stares intensely, his eyes glowing red as a fiery aura erupts around his body while he says, "No." Cian smirks as his face is cast in a purple glow, thinking of a better way to make her miserable and planning to do it nice and slowly. Cian Vert confronts Cian in the ornate hall, reminding him that she is entering the academy with Kronz and demanding to know what he is getting at. Cian smirks with glowing red eyes, asking if they are worried and want Kranz to graduate with all his limbs intact. Emily's eyes glow green with fury as she grits her teeth, flames raging in the background. Cian lunges forward with her arm outstretched to strike, her mouth open in a furious shout. Cian smirks and extends his arm, now encased in a decorative metallic gauntlet. Jurkin turns and urgently insists they can delay no further because his grace is waiting for them. A woman beside him shares his worried expression while Cian stands in the background, observing the exchange. Jurkin looks down with a stern expression and glowing eyes, formally asking to be excused. A woman in a yellow dress clenches her fists and glares forward as a nervous maid stands behind her, both overshadowed by a large figure in dark armor. Cian grins widely and snickers, asserting the Duke's orders are absolute. Jurkin stands in full armor, guarding the young Cian who looks reassured to be protected by a knight loyal only to the Duke. Someone knocks on the wooden door, and a voice from inside the room invites them to enter. Cian stands in a well-lit, ornate room facing a figure behind a large desk as he is announced as the youngest of the House of Vert. Cian looks upward with a reverent expression, speaking to the figure before him. Duke Cian Vert is the stern, blonde-haired great lord who rules over Valias, the western territory of the Wusif Empire. Cian Vert stands in profile wearing ornate dark armor, his expression stern as he is introduced as the guardian of the continent, a great hero gifted with powerful magic and a sharp mind. Cian charges on horseback, fighting a multitude of monstrous demons with a winged ally as explosions detonate around them. Cian Vert has a stern and determined expression, illuminated by a bright light. Before his death during the Demon King's invasion, his only wish was for peace on the continent. Cian and Cian Vert sit across from each other in a lavish room, engaged in a serious and reflective conversation. Cian sits before a sunlit bookshelf, his face devoid of emotion as he reflects on the man who lived his life for others, deeming him a fool. Cian Vert stands in his decorated uniform with his arms folded, sternly stating that the other person dodged the sword because they knew exactly where it was going. Cian looks up with wide, confused eyes and questions what he just heard. Cian saw the trajectory of Kronz's lunging rapier and turned his body just enough to dodge the attack. Cian Vert stares off-panel with a serious expression and asks when his opponent learned swordsmanship. Cian looks surprised, nervously telling the robed figure he calls father that he trained by himself every night. Cian Vert confronts the individual, questioning how they hid their swordsmanship talent when the Cian he knows has no aptitude or interest in it. Cian sits at a table across from Cian Vert, scratching his head as he explains he didn't want to draw attention to himself. Cian Vert listens and questions this, pointing out how masterfully Cian outmaneuvered Kranz. Cian looks upward as a hand grasps his head from above. Cian Vert smirks from the foreground while watching a man in the background stomp on a figure, asking if the action was excessive. Cian narrows his eyes with a bead of sweat on his face, asking if the question is an attempt to judge his character. Cian Vert kneels on a sofa across from another person and confesses that he wanted to prove himself, prompting the other individual to ask what he means. Cian declares that although they are half-brothers, he is superior to Kronz, and he concluded that proving this is the true purpose of their sparring matches. Cian Vert chuckles from the side, causing Cian to stare with wide eyes as a bead of sweat forms on his temple. Cian Vert laughs heartily with his eyes glowing yellow, holding up his left hand as he expresses his overjoyed delight at the sharp answer. Cian Vert smiles confidently and declares that Ashel will be of great assistance to Ashel someday as a solemn, faded image of Ashel stands behind him. Cian stares forward, his eyes wide with utter shock and disbelief. A heavily armored man extends his sword towards Ashel, who stands distressed with red energy flowing around his head among crumbling structures. Cian Vert smirks slightly, his yellow eyes glowing as he thinks about his father's unchanged obsession with Ashel. Cian clenches his fist tightly on his leg. Cian Vert smiles confidently and offers a personalized reward for winning the match, asking the victor to name what they would like. Cian's eyes narrow with intense determination as his expression hardens. Cian stares forward with a sinister and determined smirk, vowing to destroy everything Ashel sets out to do. Emily screams in horror, her eyes wide with shock and her hands raised in despair as she questions going to the front lines. Emily confronts Cian, red energy flaring around her as she yells in furious disbelief, while he sits calmly on the bed. Emily screams with a horrified expression, finding herself surrounded by a horde of demon beasts with glowing red eyes. Their territory is deadliest, the westernmost region of the Wusif Empire. A map displays the geographical area known as the Front Lines, the only place in the empire with that name, identifying its foremost region as Lamea Valley. Armored knights clash with monstrous demons in a grand silhouette battle, fiery energy erupting from both sides as the centuries-long war continues to rage. Cian stands before his father, who sits with his back turned in a room lined with bookshelves, recalling how his father vehemently opposed his plan, but eventually consented on a single condition. Cian stares at his outstretched hand, resolving to become qualified for Lamea Valley within a month, even though he does not yet know what the qualifications are. Cian clenches his fist with a determined expression, resolving to build more muscle because he is still much weaker than his peers. Cian's gaze sharpens, his eye reflecting the distant fight as he acknowledges his battle instincts from a previous life remain. Cian sits on his bed, observing the red magical energy glowing from his hands. He feels the magic remaining in his body and realizes he can make good use of it by training. He decides to start training immediately. Someone barges through a door, shouting for Cian. Cian Vert reaches his hand forward and begins to speak. Cian sits with his mouth hanging open. Emily watches them from the sunlit background. The blue-haired woman stares forward with a shocked and intense expression, her hand clenching into a tight fist. Cian is violently choked by unseen hands, his eyes widening in fear. Cian grabs a man by the collar and shakes him violently while Emily runs into the room with a shocked expression. Cian grabs her brother by the collar, her expression furious as she demands to know if he told their father he wants to go to the front lines. He struggles in her grip, asking her to let go first while Emily peeks out from the background and cautiously tries to get their attention. Cian stands over the defeated man on the floor, angrily declaring that beating Kranz in a sparring match does not make him a real warrior and that he will not have it. Aaron shouts the command to head to the rooftop. A European-style city district stands under a starlit night sky, its windows glowing with light. Cian stands on a street at night, his back to the viewer as he faces a woman. He holds his sword, poised for a duel. He sighs and dictates the terms of their fight, explaining it will begin the moment their swords are drawn. He promises to let her go to the front lines if she can withstand his attacks for 3 minutes. Cian looks apprehensive with a sweat drop on his cheek, asking his sister if this is really necessary. Aaron stares forward with a determined expression, brushing aside the previous topic to ask a single question about Cian. Ashel stares forward with intense, focused eyes as he asks about carrying on the family name. Cian looks forward with a stern expression, questioning the topic and bluntly stating he has zero interest in it. Cian Vert draws her sword and assumes a combat stance, pointing the blade forward. Cian sheathes his sword, standing exhausted in front of a dark castle as he reflects on his tiring spar with Kranz. He lunges forward, his legs driving him across the stone floor. Cian flinches with wide, surprised eyes as a drop of sweat runs down his temple. Aaron unleashes a powerful energy blast, violently striking Cian in midair. Cian stares in disbelief over her arm as the young boy grimaces, successfully blocking her attack. Cian lunges forward with her glowing sword as Aaron stands in the background before the fortress. Cian Vert stands frozen in shock, gripping her longsword as her eyes widen in disbelief that her attack was just parried by a thin rapier. Aaron smiles with veins pulsing on her forehead, questioning if Cian's survival was a fluke and acknowledging his unexpected grit. Cian panics, his eyes wide and face covered in sweat as he realizes he is screwed and calls out for Ellis. Cian and Jurkin exchange a flurry of blows, their blades creating bright flashes on impact as Jurkin leaps into the air to strike down from above. Cian swings her sword downwards, and Jurkin blocks the blow with his own blade, their weapons clashing together. Cian delivers a swift sword strike to Cian Vert, who falls backward from the powerful blow. Cian's eyes widen in shock, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Emily slashes downwards with her glowing sword, aiming directly for Cian. Jurkin grinds his teeth, his face contorting from the strain as sweat covers his brow. A hand forcefully twists a mechanical control grip, surrounded by streaks of glowing energy. Cian lands a powerful blow on Aaron, sending him recoiling backward into the air from the bright flash of the impact. A figure's dark shoes land silently on a stone ledge. Cian crouches with his sword, sweating with wide eyes as he gasps for breath. He thinks about how close he came to killing her, realizing he had to twist his sword because most Black Mist sword techniques are instantly fatal. A purple and pink magical emblem radiates energy against a dark background. Cian sweats, his jaw clenched in strain and his eyes glowing as he wonders how much longer until the 3 minutes are up. Cian grips his sword tightly, channeling swirling magical energy into the blade and pushing himself to his absolute limit. Cian pants, sweat beading on his face as he strains to invoke a spell and chants, "O earth, O wind, come and become my sword." Cian's eyes widen in shock as sweat beads on his face. Cian breathes out, wielding a sword that glows with powerful blue energy as he names it the Aqua Blade. Cian's eyes are wide with panic as sweat drips down his face, questioning if she is trying to kill him when this was supposed to be a test. Erin's eye glows a piercing blue from behind her dark glasses as steam pours from her mouth. She endlessly mutters the words, "I won't lose," while her eyes completely cloud over. Cian crouches defensively, gripping his sword with a strained expression as he realizes blocking the attack will still send him flying over the castle walls. Cian unleashes a powerful attack, sending dark streaks of energy forward that culminate in a bright blue burst against the dark buildings. Cian leaps into the air and brings his glowing blue sword down in a powerful strike, while Ashel stands composed below him. Cian lunges forward with a desperate expression, gripping his rapier. Cian emanates powerful blue energy from his body, yelling impatiently for his opponent Rumble to reveal himself. Jurkin leaps down, bringing his sword down to strike Cian. Erin screams for him to stop as she unleashes a burst of magic to intervene. Cian clashes his sword against the blades of both Emily and Erin, generating a massive burst of energy from the impact of their simultaneous attack. A massive blue explosion erupts over the fortified city, sending out shockwaves and scattering debris. Jurkin's face twists in a pained expression, a scar visible over his left eye as blue energy glows from his side, and he utters the name of Lady Ellis. A man holds the defeated young Lord Cian by the neck as a woman lunges forward with a glowing blue sword. Jurkin shouts, asking if this is excessive since their opponent is the young lord. Cian looks up with a relieved expression as an armored white arm grips his wrist and pulls him upwards. Emily's eyes widen in shock as she lets out a sharp gasp. Erin shouts an apology while squeezing Cian in a crushing hug, causing him to choke as Cian Vert watches. Tears stream down Erin's face as she hugs Cian, confessing that she couldn't stand to see him go to the front lines and was so intent on stopping him that she forgot what she was doing. Cian embraces Ellis, holding her close as she sheds a single tear. Ellis, the narrator's older sister, attended the academy for the continent's most talented students in swordsmanship, magic, and academics, where she was an unmatched S-class elite in all subjects. Cian stands with a sword, surrounded by flowers and light as people called her the godchild for her beauty, having grown up holding a sword in her hand. A potential guardian's glowing red and white silhouette dissipates against a dark, splattered background, her life ending tragically not long after she entered the Order of Light. A hand squeezes down on Alice's shoulder, the grip causing the blue and dark fabric of their clothing to wrinkle. Erin embraces Cian tightly, his determined expression fixed as he shields him from the surrounding debris. Cian sits on the ground cradling a small child and looks up at Jurkin, who has his back turned to her. She asks why her father's guardian knight is not with her father on his journey. Jurkin confesses to my lady with a stern expression, a sweat drop on his temple as he explains he is secretly following his grace's orders to protect Lord Cian. Cian glances from under his blue hood with a sly expression, thinking about how he noticed someone following him the moment he left his father's office, and wonders if they would have remained hidden had he pretended better. Cian's expression becomes pensive as he questions his father's secret order for Jurkin to protect him. Cian catches the black-haired person as they suddenly collapse unconscious into her arms. Emily looks forward with a subtle smile, letting out a quiet chuckle. A mansion with pointed roofs stands under a star-filled night sky as the glow of dawn illuminates distant mountains. Cian collapses to his hands and knees, his body trembling violently as he struggles on the floor. Cian strains to complete his 10th repetition, sweat and drool dripping from his face as his body trembles from the exertion. He realized he needed to build his strength and focused solely on exercising for the past 2 weeks. Cian lies sprawled on the wooden floor, drenched in sweat and utterly exhausted. He is defeated, having reached his limit after 2 weeks of nothing but disappointment. Cian contrasts his current weaker physique with the memory of his formerly muscular body, becoming frustrated as he urgently tries to devise a new plan. Cian approaches his lord, presenting a package and announcing it is a delivery from Lady Ellis. Emily covers her nose with her hand, repulsed by the foul smell coming from the small bottle of dark liquid hanging around her neck. A fiery, dog-like creature looms behind a glowing green bottle, a rare item that can only be obtained from Lamea Valley, proving the rumors of its availability on the black market were true. A hand pours dark, viscous demon beast blood from a vial into a bowl, causing the liquid to bubble. The blood smells atrocious and causes a burning sensation in the mouth, so most consider it a poison. Cian glows with orange and red energy, his body silhouetted while he flexes his bicep. Cian sweats as he holds a bowl emanating a dark mist, believing it worked in his previous life. Emily looks on with concern, asking if he will really drink it, and he confirms his intention, telling her not to worry. Cian sits at the table and drinks from the steaming bowl, a pained expression on his face as he remembers being the only person who could eat her cooking. A steaming bowl holds a lumpy purple substance. A mushroom soup the narrator recalls stopped his heart after a single spoonful. A pair of hands slams a bowl down onto a surface, splashing the liquid inside. Cian screams with glowing red eyes as blood drips from his mouth, and Emily watches from the background with a disgusted expression. A man surrounded by red energy suddenly calls out to Emily, who flinches in surprise. Cian glances from the shadows, his eye glowing red, as he announces he is going for a walk to test the hellhound's blood. Cian drags his feet through the dirt, laboriously climbing the incline. Cian stands with their back to the viewer, looking out over a distant town and the surrounding landscape after waiting 2 weeks for this day. Cian stands outdoors under a clear sky with an annoyed expression, thinking about how Jerkin is away giving a routine report. He considers the pain of being tailed all the time and recalls how he used to come to this spot when he wanted to be alone. Cian stands on a dirt path in a dense forest, scanning the trees and sky as he searches the backwoods of Velius for a hidden ancient shrine. Cian kneels in the forest and places his hand on the ground, sensing for a specific concentration of mana. Cian glares with glowing red eyes as he unleashes swirling dark red energy from his hand. Cian kneels and strikes the ground, unleashing a red explosive shockwave that erupts outwards. Cian forms a sinister grin as his wide eyes glow, surrounded by swirling purple and red energy. He tells Ashel she cannot imagine what he is about to do. Cian stands as the ground beneath him shatters, glowing with red energy, which reveals a dark path leading down to a bright light as he asks, "Shall we?" Cian climbs the winding stone stairs inside a dark cavern, noting the place is different from the last time he was here. A winged angelic figure raises a weapon against a roaring, horned demon as a violent, ancient battle rages around them. A war between gods and demons from 300 years ago that wiped all history from the land. Cian stands on crumbling steps within a cavern, looking up at a grand, ruined shrine that glows with a powerful light as debris falls around him, identifying the place as a former shrine dedicated to the god of light, Lumendel. Cian stares ahead into the desolate landscape, questioning how a place like this was hidden in his own backwoods. Cian looks up the crumbling staircase inside the derelict structure, his eyes fixed on a glowing, ornate sword impaled on a pedestal at the top. An ornate sword stands upright in the center of ancient ruins, radiating light from its glowing hilt. On August 12, 999 SC, humans drive out the demon army that was occupying the territory of Velius, pushing back the dark, armored figures with glowing red eyes. Humans were no match for the demons until they discovered ancient relics called the Weapons of the Gods, which granted them a swift victory. One of these relics was Duran Dark, a holy sword blessed by Lumendel, the god of light. It was one of the most important weapons used to drive out the demon army. Cian recalls his brother, Ashel, raising the sword and unleashing a ruthless blast of light that engulfs him and the figures standing nearby. Cian stands beside the large, glowing sword, Duran Dark, and considers that it might be related to his return to the past. Cian touches a glowing, ornate piece of gold and blue armor. Cian looks down with a resigned sigh, confirming his expectation that nothing is happening. Cian defiantly kicks the glowing sword standing upright in its stone pedestal. Cian stands in a dark chamber before a glowing, ornate sword on a pedestal, his frustration evident. He dismisses the holy sword, annoyed that his efforts only resulted in a bad mood, and resolves to focus on his original objective. Cian stands on a damaged circular platform, observing a luminous sword floating above him and a red, shadowy sword embedded in the floor below. He states that beyond the light, an odd shadow can be seen, and he has found it. Cian kneels on the ornate floor, observing a glowing red projection shimmering on the ground that looks like the shadow of a sword. Cian stares forward with an intense and serious expression as debris floats around him in a bright, glowing light. He internally concludes that the situation makes no sense, realizing this is no shadow. Cian crouches over an ornate surface as a swirling vortex of red and dark energy erupts from beneath him. Shrouded by the altar of light, Cian stands on a glowing red magic circle, looking towards a crumbling, dark doorway that reveals a path into another chamber. Cian slowly opens the creaking door and cautiously peers through the gap at the chains hanging in the darkness. Cian stands in a ruined grand hall, looking towards a glowing, magical dagger floating above a pedestal. Cian's hand firmly grips the ornate, reddish-black hilt of his magic sword. Kairam's eyes glow red as an aura of red and black energy surrounds him, and he wields a blade infused with dark power while speaking his name. Cian grins menacingly with glowing purple eyes, holding an ornate blade enveloped in bright pink energy. Cian swiftly wields two glowing red daggers, asking if his opponent is still sleeping. Cian smiles with delight, affectionately holding the glowing crimson dagger. He loves its familiar feeling and cannot wait to slice something with it. A shadowy entity with glowing purple eyes rises from the ground before Cian, laughing and calling him a daring boy. Cian stands in a suit with a stern expression, holding a dagger that emanates a dark pink ethereal energy from its blade. Kairam stands defiantly before a colossal grinning shadow entity, gripping his sword hilt as magical rain falls around him. The entity tells Kairam he was foolish to awaken the magic sword. A monstrous face emerges from the smoky darkness, its pink eyes glowing as it pulls back its lips into a wide, jagged-toothed grin and tells the boy it is too late for regrets. A shadowy tendril grabs Cian's arm as dark energy erupts around him, the entity trying to take over his body. Kairam sweats profusely as he grips an unseen arm, his face twisted in distress amidst swirling dark and red energy while he demands to know the identity of his reckless opponent. Cian grins with glowing red eyes, surrounded by a red aura as one hand emits a bright light. He demands to know how he is being touched, declaring that his opponent belongs to him. A hand with a golden bracelet and sharp, pink-tipped fingers slashes through the air, trailing an energetic glow. Cian slashes a man with a glowing purple arc of energy, forcing him to recoil from the impact. Cian fires a projectile, sending Emily sliding rapidly back through the air. Emily radiates purple energy, her face filled with distress as she shouts and demands to know her opponent's identity. Cian stands in the ruined hall as dark, reddish-pink energy radiates from his body and his eyes glow red, prompting Kairam to ask if he is the successor. Cian questions why he feels Air's energy on his opponent, then answers his own question by declaring that he is Air's successor. Cian looks down with glowing red eyes and a wide grin, announcing that their master has returned and commanding them to bow. Cian grits his teeth in rage, his orange eyes burning with frustration at a mere boy wielding the magic sword Kairam. Cian engages his opponent in a high-speed exchange, their weapons scraping and clanging together amidst bright bursts of magical energy. He screams that he won't accept it as they continue their rapid movements. Cian holds his glowing magic sword, his expression intense as he faces the snarling Aaron. He states that words are no longer enough and explains the sword's goal is to take over the wielder's body, declaring that Aaron leaves him no other choice. Cian lunges through the air with an energy attack while Emily twists her body to evade the strike. Cian strains with a pained expression, baring his teeth. Jurkin activates sword manipulation, violently slanting Cian with a dark force. Cian cries out from the impact as Jurkin calmly observes his attack hitting its mark. Cian issues a final warning, demanding they accept him as their master before he is forced to use more violence. Jurkin is pinned to the ground by dark energy, gritting his teeth with a shocked and angry expression as he demands to know how the incantation was used against him. Cian activates sword manipulation, violently slamming his opponent into the ground with swirling dark energy as the victim cries out. Cian strains, his face contorted with effort as he repeatedly activates sword manipulation to slam his opponent into the ground. Cian stands over a defeated figure lying face down on the cracked floor as the man verbally submits. Cian lies prostrate and defeated on the cracked ground. He cuts off his sword manipulation chant and submits to Aaron, calling him master. Cian watches dark energy dissipate from a large, chained door and declares he has gotten what he came for. Cian stands in an ornate chamber holding a dark, glowing sword from which a shadowy feminine figure emanates, and he thinks that he has been away for too long and should head back. Cian grips a metallic device as swirling red and pink energy engulfs his hand. Kairam speeds through the ornate Gothic interior, a grinning, shadowy figure wreathed in pink flames. A small pink entity floats behind Cian and asks for his name, prompting him to turn around with a surprised expression and state that his name is Cian Vert. Kairam floats as a shadowy entity wreathed in glowing pink flames, baring his sharp fangs with anger and disdain. Cian gazes off to the side, confirming it happened in his previous life. Cian shouts at the fiery spirit, demanding to know what it means by previous life, and stating that he died once before. Kairam's shadowy form emanates a fiery red aura, his glowing orange eyes narrowing in confusion as he internally questions the identity of the kid. Cian observes a large, ornate sword glowing as it's embedded in the cracked floor. A small black spirit floats beside him, stating the sword is still asleep and its master will not show up for another 20 years. Cian's eyes glow blue as he holds a luminous pink dagger, his gaze serious. A small, angry shadow creature with pink flames hovers at his side while he states that his opponent knows something he doesn't. An unseen force slices the ornate scepter in half, causing the glowing staff to break apart and emit a bright light from the cut. Cian stands in the ruined hull holding a pink dagger when a glowing sword suddenly slams into the ground beside him, causing him to look over in surprise as a shadowy monster questions his intentions. An unseen speaker states they are not sure yet. Cian grins sinisterly with glowing red eyes, holding up a bright, ornate artifact while the worried Kyram floats behind him. He states it's going to make things interesting later. Cian guides a horse-drawn carriage along a dirt path toward a distant mansion at sunset. A dark, ornate carriage wheel stops abruptly on the sandy ground. Cian stands in battle armor with his hand resting on his sword, his expression resolute as he thinks to himself that the promised day has already arrived. Cian, clad in heavy armor, bows deeply before several authoritative figures as the sun sets behind them. Cian Vert, dressed in his formal military uniform, looks down with a serious expression and asks the person if they are still determined to go to the front lines, assuring them he will not hold it against them if they back out now. Cian stands with a determined expression and raises his right hand, declaring to his father that his heart is already at the front lines. Jurkin grips Cian's arm, stopping him from reaching forward. He orders Cian to release the object, and Cian immediately agrees, addressing him as, "Your Grace." Cian Vert swiftly produces a rolled-up scroll with a stern expression. Cian's eye sharpens as a bright glow emanates from the side of his head. Cian's metal-clad hand holds a piece of paper, where a red symbol glows and radiates with light. Cian unleashes intense fiery red energy from his spine, facing a group of indistinct figures shrouded in their own red auras. A massive, clawed foot glowing with red energy smashes down, cracking the earth beneath the immense impact. A massive, fiery hellhound with glowing red eyes lunges forward and roars as Cian looks on in shock, identifying the creature. Cian smirks while gripping his sword hilt, recognizing the creature before him as a low-level demon beast from Lamea Valley. He thinks to himself that his father and the knights went through some trouble to prepare this test. A gloved hand grasps the hilt of a sword, drawing the blade from its scabbard. Cian watches the armored figures in the distance, concluding they will intervene if the situation worsens. Cian Vert stands beside Jurkin in full military uniform under a dramatic sky. He looks forward with a stern expression, addressing an unseen person. Cian Vert declares that a warrior's words come with responsibility and challenges them to prove their resolve for the front lines by completing a trial. Jurkin contemplates a trial, his scarred face set in a stern and determined expression. Jurkin tightens his gloved hand around the hilt of his large, dark sword. Jurkin stands in a military-style uniform with armored gauntlets, looking surprised as he asks if someone wants to spar with him. Cian stands in a courtyard before an armored man, thinking about the deadline his father set, which is only 3 days away. He concludes that he can't just practice by swinging his sword at the air. Cian smiles confidently and asks for help to gain some real experience. Jurkin sweats, his expression concerned as he looks away and suggests they spar with someone like Lord Kranz instead. Cian watches Kranz run frantically down the hallway, yelling for him to stay back, and wonders why the other student keeps avoiding him. Jurkin's expression is stern and stressed as he contemplates his tough position, clearing his throat. Cian offers a cheerful and open smile while dressed in his formal attire. Jurkin holds his sheathed sword and declares he will only use the scabbard to defend, telling his opponent to attack as much as they like. Cian stands behind Jurkin, holding his drawn sword. He thanks Jurkin and tells him he has one more request. Kyram stares forward with glowing red eyes and a stern expression, commanding his sparring partner not to tell their father a single word about what happens during their sessions. Jurkin turns his head to the side, his stern expression silently questioning the order. Cian's eye glows intensely red as he lunges forward with incredible speed. Jurkin and Cian clash their weapons in a bright flash, the force of the impact sending one of them skidding backward. Jurkin recoils in pain and shock, his arm throbbing as he stares at the shattered remains of his sword. Cian executes an incredibly fast sword thrust that his opponent barely blocks, causing a nearby observer to stare in shock at the speed of the attack. Cian rapidly turns, reacting with surprise to an unseen force. A glowing figure moves rapidly through the air above Jurkin, who stares up with his eyes wide in complete shock. Cian fixes his gaze forward with intense concentration, his eyes flaring with blue energy as he braces himself. Cian and Jurkin exchange rapid blows at close range, their weapons clashing repeatedly as bright energy flares from the impacts. Cian locks his blade with his opponent's, the two swords grinding together with immense force as sparks fly from the impact. Cian's eyes glow red as he swings his sword in a swift, blurred motion. Jurkin parries Cian's attack, their swords colliding in a bright flash of light. Cian plants his foot on the wet surface, a grand building visible in the background. Cian praises Jurkin for his good work and thanks him for his help as they stand together in front of a large building. Jurkin stands in ornate armor amidst the debris of a damaged building, holding his staff with a visibly surprised expression. Cian smiles with his eyes closed, a drop of sweat on his face as he reacts with surprised disbelief to his opponent's skill. Jurkin looks to the side with a stern expression on his scarred face, recalling the feeling from that day and stating his confidence in Lord Cian. Cian stands in his armor with his sword drawn, facing a large, snarling wolf monster wreathed in flames. Cian leaps through the air, hurtling down at incredible speed before smashing his hand into the ground with explosive force. Cian turns sharply in his armor, his expression serious as he prepares for a swift action. A fiery, wolf-like creature lunges forward as Cian's eye glows intensely red, and he lands a powerful slice. Cian swings his sword in mid-air, generating an arc of energy that strikes the ground and erupts into a fiery explosion. Cian stares forward with a determined expression, his purple eyes glowing as he acknowledges he is too weak to fight demon beasts directly and must end the fight as swiftly as possible. A monstrous creature engulfed in flames charges forward as a figure lunges to deliver a life-ending blow. Cian lunges forward with intense focus, swinging his sword in a swift, blurring arc. The dark creature is engulfed by an explosive blast, the attack slicing into its body and shattering its form on impact. Cian leaps into the air, bringing his sword down in a powerful strike on the large, fiery monster. Jurkin and the surrounding knights and officers stare forward in shock and distress, their faces filled with disbelief. Jurkin flashes a wide, confident grin across his bearded face. Cian stands over the large, burning wolf creature, looking down at its fatal wound and commenting on the wasted blood. Cian smiles widely as he pulls his sword from the head of a defeated creature in a desolate, rocky landscape, tugging the blade free. Cian Vert claps his hands together and praises Cian, who looks on with a calm expression while Jurkin observes from the background. Cian Vert stands with his red cape flapping against the cloudy sky, looking intensely to the side as he declares that someone has proven themselves worthy of going to the front lines. Cian stands over the defeated creature and looks gratefully towards his father, thanking him. Cian looks to his left with an alert expression as dark, swirling energy appears behind him and a voice calls out. Jurkin looks on as an angered, glowing pink entity floats beside him and demands to know if it's a kitchen knife, to which he replies that it is a magic sword and asks why. Chiron manifests as an enraged, shadowy mass with glowing eyes and sharp teeth, surrounded by a vibrant pink-purple aura as it screams to be used, declaring it needs blood for power. Chiron, a small pink-flamed spirit, cries and pleads with a large dog-like creature for a single sip while Cian watches them silently. Chiron rapidly manifests as a shadowy entity wreathed in pink flames, his eyes glowing as he grins confidently and states that they have nothing to worry about. Cian holds a glowing purple blade, his eyes burning red as dark energy radiates from his body. He grins menacingly, telling the weapon he will be using it a lot soon. A shadowy, spherical entity yells furiously, its glowing red eyes and mouth wide open. Cian Vert screams orders, commanding his troops to form formations and move toward the northwest. He demands the swift annihilation of the ogres, ordering that not one survives, while an ogre roars and brandishes a large axe. Jurkin shouts the command to discharge the restraints of salvation, and the armored soldiers behind him raise their glowing swords. A brilliant, cross-shaped magic circle radiates light over a horde of large monsters, causing them to recoil from the sudden impact. A horde of large, muscular, orc-like creatures appears within a circle of glowing magical glyphs, standing in a desolate landscape under a red sky. Jurkin roars and throws a powerful punch, his fist glowing with bright red energy. Jurkin charges forward on his horse, shouting the command to attack. Cian swiftly cuts through multiple large, beast-like monsters, his blade leaving powerful, glowing slashes in its wake. Cian surges with energy and charges the colossal monster as it roars. Jurkin lunges forward in his ornate armor, rapidly thrusting a spear-like weapon. Cian swings his glowing sword downward at Aaron. Cian sits calmly atop his white horse over the defeated monster, while Emily screams in terror behind him. Emily looks up at Cian, her face distraught and streaked with tears as she screams, asking why he would come to this place and questioning if he feels any fear. Cian looks down at her, his calm expression partially obscured. Cian rides a white horse through a desolate landscape under a red sky as dragons fly overhead. A small figure clings to him, crying and screaming in fear. He thinks to himself that he has returned to this hellish place. Cian Vert, dressed in full armor, speaks to his son Cian among a group of people under a red sky. He asks Cian how it feels to be on the front lines. Cian stands nervously beside a horse and admits to his father that he is a little nervous. Cian Vert rides his horse in elaborate armor under a red sky, his face stern as he lectures. He warns that a soldier can fall at any moment on the battlefield and that one must never let down their guard. Cian stares forward with a determined expression in his dark hooded cloak, vowing to his father that he will not forget and that this is just another day on the front lines. Jurkin stands with his armored soldiers on the battlements, overlooking a fiery sky and multiple siege weapons as he explains that they fight 3 or 4 battles a day according to detailed response protocols. Cian swings his glowing sword, cutting through multiple demon beasts as fiery explosions erupt around him on the front lines. Jurkin stands in armor and a white cloak, observing the military camp spread out below him under a red sky. Cian peeks from the flap of his assigned tent, confirming its location is the furthest one from the front lines. Cian looks pensive with his hand near his chest, considering how he will find prey for Kiram with all the guards assigned to him. Cian considers waiting until night, then notices a figure trembling under a white cloth and asks the person, Emily, what she is doing. Emily is suddenly pressed flat against the floor by an unseen force, her expression alarmed. Cian looks to the side with sweat on his exasperated face, sighing as he questions why someone who fears death in this place doesn't just pack up and go home. Cian leans over the smaller person, his face contorted with rage as he demands they scream about being helpless without him. Emily looks down at the sweating man, her expression a mix of terror and fierce determination. She screams that the place is full of demon beasts and she cannot run away scared because she has to protect him. The hooded Emily pushes past Cian, yelling for him to step aside for supper as Cian shouts after her about the cape. Cian stands alone inside a dimly lit, industrial room. Cian grinds his teeth, his face contorted into an intense grin as a furious red aura swirls around him. Cian's hand clutches the fabric face of a doll, tugging the material near its button eyes and stitched mouth. Cian, cloaked and with his back turned, looks down at a person in bed, declaring the job finished. Cian looks up with a startled expression as another person, visible only from the shoulders down, asks if he is also out to exercise before realizing he is awake. Emily groggily wakes up in bed to see a figure in dark attire standing over her, who states that she is industrious and that His Grace would be proud. Cian holds the hood of his dark cloak and looks to the side, telling his companion he will be back and is counting on them as always before he turns to leave. Cian, concealed by a hood, peeks from behind a curtain to address his lord. Cian dashes across the barren red terrain, his lower body glowing with crimson energy. Cian stands alone in a desolate landscape under the moon, manifesting a powerful red, smoky aura. He gazes toward a distant settlement, resolving that this is his only chance. Cian lunges forward, executing the third stance of the black mist. Foggy descent as swirling red energy surrounds his cloaked body. 3 wolf-like monsters emerge from a fiery, desolate landscape, their eyes glowing red as they bare sharp fangs and growl. Jurkin smirks as his eyes glow red, a dark red aura emanating from him as he calls it the perfect place to test Kiram and asks for his agreement. A hooded figure moves swiftly, swinging a dark, ornate weapon that glows with intense red energy while shouting about tasting blood. Cian's red eyes glow from beneath his hood while he grips a dark, pulsating red blade with a menacing smirk. Swirling dark energy envelops him as he tells his master he can barely contain himself and needs to cut something quickly. The cloaked Cian radiates red energy and unleashes a fiery, wolf-like creature with glowing red eyes that lunges forward. Cian flips upside down in midair, his red eyes glowing under a dark hood as he grits his teeth. He unleashes a downward strike surrounded by radiating pink magical energy, shouting, "Cut away." Cian unleashes his attack, Glare Misty Blade, Foggy Tempest, sending a powerful red energy blade from his sword as his eyes glow intensely. Multiple red energy slashes violently strike the fiery dog-like monster as an armored figure stands within the chaotic attack. Cian plunges a blade into the side of the large, wolf-like creature. A hand holds a wooden mug as red liquid trickles into it from a dark, furry spout. Jurkin, his face obscured by a hood, lifts a flask to his lips and drinks. Cian stands hooded, his eyes glowing red with blood staining his mouth as he clutches a glowing pink dagger and a wooden cup, looking utterly refreshed while surrounded by dark red energy. Cian stands in a desolate landscape, flanked by two large red-eyed shadow beasts, and declares that while the training is perfect, it will take forever to grow strong fighting weak mutts like these. Cian's purple eyes glow from under his dark hood as he smirks confidently, telling them not to worry because the night is long. Cian stands cloaked, holding a glowing red dagger as he faces a vast horde of monsters under a red, star-filled sky, looking excited by the sheer number of enemies. A convoy of 2 carriages and several riders travels along a winding mountain pass under a star-filled night sky. Cian stands in his armor, partially blocking the carriage window as Emily looks out from inside. Cian looks over his shoulder and tells Emily it's not too late to turn back, addressing her as Your Highness. Emily remains seated and retorts that he should not treat her like a child. Erin glares and angrily repeats that she is the imperial princess and must assist her father, the emperor, on his tour. Emily, with her back turned, declares that she will not allow any more such talk, prompting Cian to bow his head and obediently address her as Your Highness. Cian looks concerned as she suddenly remembers that Duke Vert's youngest son is at the front lines. Cian reacts with a shocked expression, his mouth agape as a bead of sweat forms on his temple. Cian smiles and gestures with an open hand, suggesting to Your Highness that they and the other volunteer could become friends. Cian turns away sharply with a flustered expression, insisting she is not interested and announcing she is going to sleep. Cian keeps his head bowed, his face contorted in a strained and distressed expression as he answers. Emily gazes downward with a distressed expression and asks for his name. He stares with wide, shocked eyes at the figure from behind, recognizing the man as Cian and exclaiming that his full name was Lord Cian Vert. Cian stands in profile, his face set in a tense grimace as he mumbles his own name in question. Erin stares intensely, her red eyes widening in recognition as a glowing sword becomes partially visible at her side.